but they get along very well. That so many people in such a small area can really coexist in a very structured way is quite amazing, okay? Lots of good things about China, lots of business opportunities over there as well, with a growing population and an ever-growing populace that has money in their pockets and can spend money, okay? Now let me tell you about some of the things in China that you can't do, that you may or may not have considered. Well, if you want to learn anything, if you want to do anything in this country, what do? Do you ask your neighbor? Do you look it up in an encyclopedia? No, you Google it. How do you keep up with your friends in this country? Well, you go to Facebook, right? What do you do on Sunday? Well, you go to church, you go to Mass, okay? Can't do any of that in China. There is no Google in China. They used to have a Chinese Google, but it wasn't the same thing. It was censored. It was truncated. I don't think they even have that there anymore. They have their own search engine. If you search Tiananmen Square in the Chinese search engine, it says doesn't exist. There is no Facebook. That also is banned. When I was in China one Sunday with a colleague, I explained to him, hey, look, it's Sunday. I kind of like to find a church, go to Mass. So we found a church, and it really wasn't that terribly far away. I want to say a mile, maybe less, and said it was open. Okay, so we went. It was kind of open, and it was a Catholic church, St. So-and-so's, but they really didn't have Mass. It was kind of a museum, and that's how it was open. Kind of like this is the way things used to be thing, kind of like a zoo where you look at the animals, okay? When you go to the zoo and you see the elephants, you don't look at them roaming in the wild. They're in a cage, and people look at it and say, oh, wow, look, it's an elephant. And you imagine what that elephant would do in Africa or India. Same thing with the church in China. There's really no church. There's no religious freedom at all in China, okay? If you say the wrong thing, you're chastised and told not to do it again. If you say the wrong thing too many times, you go to jail. If you continue to say the wrong thing after you go to jail, you disappear. But the people tolerate this because the totalitarian communist government policies have helped raise the standard of living for the people. The fact that they tolerate it doesn't necessarily mean that they like it. In fact, they absolutely do not like it. But they thought, look, these guys are in charge. If we just kind of play the game, smile when they look, we can make some money and increase the standard of living for our family. So they tolerate it so they can increase their standard of living. Okay? Nobody believes that the COVID-19 statistics that came out of China. The number of people that were sick, the number of people died, when it happened. Nobody believes them. Nobody does. In fact, not even the Chinese people believe it, especially the Chinese people in Wuhan, the citizens. They don't believe it. Yeah, the government's lying to us. We understand that. We know that, okay? But let's just get back to normal and start earning a living again. They get that. Everyone accepts the fact that their government will lie, steal, cheat, and kill to protect the party. Perfect example, the young doctor who blew the whistle on the COVID-19 pandemic. This guy said, look, this is a big deal. This isn't the regular flu. This is the big deal. We need to do something about this now. We need to implement. They found him. They yanked him out, and they put him in jail. And then guess what? He got COVID-19, and he died. He was a young man with no extenuating circumstances. I mean, he didn't have high blood pressure or cancer or obese or heart disease or lung disease, none of that, which virtually all the people in China that died fit at least one of those categories. Too old, obese, smoker, heart disease, cancer survivor. They all fit one criteria, but not this guy. Yeah, he got COVID-19 and died. Sorry. That's how they do it over there, folks. That's how they do it. And the latest example came in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Now, again, I published this in Facebook, but Wall Street Journal has this firewall, so they want you to pay to read. I pay to read it, but I know that a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have Facebook. You will hear about this policy, this story, as the day goes on, as the week continues. But this is what we're dealing with here, and I'm going to go over the story briefly. And by the way, I found it interesting that the Wall Street Journal published this story about China because about a month ago, China expelled all journalists from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, arguably three of our biggest newspapers. They just said, yeah, we don't like what you're saying about our country, so everybody leave. Now, the authors of this article, Kate O'Keefe, and a lady named Eva Zhao. Kate O'Keefe is a Wall Street Journal journalist, but she's based in Washington, D.C. And Eva Zhao, she's based in Beijing, but she works for the AFP. That's the French press. And she's also freelance. So look for her to be booted very soon. Okay. Now, I'm going to review this article. The article is actually entitled, Amid Coronavirus Pandemic, China Bans Domestic Trade of Wild Animals, but offers tax break for exports. Now, every article I read said that this whole pandemic originated in what they call a Wuhan wet market. And that's where they have stacks and stacks of animals. They have snakes and turtles and beavers and civets and beavers and all these animals stacked on top of one another. These people say, I'll take one of those. They take it, they cut it open, they skin it, and they give it to the people that take it home and cook it. Sometimes they cook it right there, okay? That's what these people do. That's what they eat. And anytime you have that many animals in that tight an area, the coronavirus, which begins in animals, can go to another animal. It can mutate and then jump to the human species. Everybody, every doctor I've read says, look, that's where it happened, okay? But, we've said, look, they need to shut that market down. Well, this report says that Chinese authorities, again, have shut down domestic wild animal traders on fear that their goods sparked the corona pandemic. However, now those same officials are offering tax incentives to the multi-billion-dollar animal products industry to ship some of these creatures overseas. That's according to Chinese government documents. Now remember, folks, this story is not coming out of Alex Jones. This story is coming out of the Wall Street Journal. Okay? So not only are they encouraging companies to export this crap, but they're giving them tax benefits to do so, to make money. Now, the China National People's Congress on February 24th, they did impose a ban on the sale and consumption of wild animals in the country. In quotes, the prominent problem recklessly eating wild animals and its potential risk to the public health have aroused wide public concern. That's a spokesman from the Chinese government, Chinese state media at that time, back on February 24th. Now, a month later, China's Minister of Finance and Tax Authorities said on March 17th that they would raise value-added tax rebates on nearly 1,500 Chinese products. That includes a 9% rebate on the export of animal products such as edible snakes and turtles, primate meat, that's monkey meat, folks, beaver, civet, musk, rhino horn. And again, that's from a Chinese government document, folks. Now, China's economy is struggling amidst a sharp global downturn and this trade war with the U.S. And now they had this pandemic which crippled them. So they're hurting, just like everybody, okay? The Chinese government's new tax incentive are tied to a broad array of exports designed to support Chinese industries from steel to construction to agricultural products, which is fine. I get that. Look, we need to export more stuff, so we're going to give you an incentive to do so. I get it. But since they've banned the sale of wild animals in their country, what's that industry going to do? This move encourages wild animals to be sold abroad, even though they're banned at home. And the report says, this is from the Chinese government, the report says that this could spread the risk to global markets. They know this. They understand this. They're admitting this, but they're doing it anyway. Now, China is also a major exporter of medicine and medical equipment, but the new tax incentives made no mention of those goods because they're in short supply. Yeah, you can export civets, beavers, rhino horn, and edible snakes and turtles, but no incentive to export the good stuff that people actually need right now. That's bizarre. Now, the Chinese Finance Ministry didn't respond to a request for comment. Neither did the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. In fact, many countries, including China and the U.S., have put export restrictions on medical exports due to global shortages. So you see why they didn't want to put a tax incentive to encourage the pushing of masks, because they might need them in the future. But they did on the other stuff. China's export of wild animals and wild animal parts are minuscule compared with the vast volume of goods that China ships abroad. In fact, China's live reptile exports, which are nearly all edible reptiles, which is disgusting, most of which go to Vietnam, it's $1 million worth of sales every 2 months. Okay? So what, $500,000 a year? That's it. That's a rounding error, folks. That's all it is. And the most bizarre thing is the Chinese government is offering a tax incentive to export rhino horn around the world. There's three problems with that. First of all, there are no rhinoceros in China, okay? Second of all, rhinoceros are an endangered species. And in most parts of the world, it's against the law. And they are encouraging and putting tax incentives on exporting rhino horn. That's bizarre, folks. That's beyond bizarre. In fact, the Center for Advanced Defense Studies Wildlife Seizure Data, that's a mouthful. It shows that after China, Vietnam is the most frequent destination for rhino horn. Vietnam is a destination for 25% of recorded seizures of rhino horn, okay? So the Chinese are wanting to export rhino horn, especially to Vietnam. By the way, you know why they want to eat rhino horn? They think it gives them a big John Thomas, a better erection. They really believe that. In fact, the exotic animal trade fuels the multi-billion-dollar traditional Chinese medicine industry also, in which products made from rhino horn and tiger bones are used to treat ailments. Many scientific studies have found no medical properties for either. Now, Beijing has promoted the use of traditional Chinese medicine in treating coronavirus patients. With the China National Health Commission last month, they recommended a remedy including bear bile, goat horn, and other ingredients for critically ill patients. Now, here's my opinion. If they want to do that with their own people, they want to believe that hokey, then let them. But you can't export it, okay? There's also a long tradition of China eating wildlife, especially in the southern regions of Guangdong and Guangxi. That's a practice that's long been criticized by animal rights activists and others. More than 1.7 million people have so far been affected by the virus, which causes the disease COVID-19. That's according to Johns Hopkins University, okay? As of yesterday, countries have reported more than 107 deaths from the virus, which first emerged in Wuhan. Okay. Now, although the health authorities have yet to identify the precise cause of the outbreak, they believe that it was a 96% genetic match with a bat coronavirus. Now, another Chinese study, in fact, that was a Chinese study. Another Chinese study suggests that snakes sold in a Wuhan market were the source. Medical researchers have said that the 2002 outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, that was SARS, also originated